400,000 years ago, a bright light traveled across the African plain. Was this the origin of the human race? 2010, Iceland. A volcano is having an eruption that grinds air traffic to a halt. Could this event have been triggered by sinister forces? In 2005, a hidden door was discovered, leading to the workshop of one of the greatest minds and his journal. Could there be written evidence in there of a third-degree contact? Hi, hello and welcome to Digging Up Ancient Aliens. This is the podcast where we examine the TV show Ancient Aliens. Do their claims hold water to an archaeologist, or are there better explanations out there? I'm your host Fredrik, and this is episode 15, and we will look into the reason behind different apocalyptical events that's taken place both in the past and today. Could all these volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, and other disasters have maybe an extraterrestrial origin? With us today, we have Eric McLaren from the podcast Religious War. As an old ancient alien watcher, he will help us out with his journalistic wit on yet another expedition of the third kind. Remember that you can find sources, resources, and reading suggestions on our website, diggingupancientaliens.com. There you can also find contact info if you notice any mistakes or have any suggestions. And if you like the podcast, I would really appreciate if you left one of those fancy 5-star reviews that I heard so much about. Enough for me jammering. Let's see what devastation was caused by aliens and why. And then I want to welcome Eric McLaren to the show. Welcome, Eric.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Could you maybe tell the audience who you are?
Sure. So my name is Eric McLaren. I'm a host and creator of a podcast called Religious Wars. It's a show where we look at history, but mainly through a religious lens, or at least religious stories. And, it's Religious Wars. So there's always got to be some conflict going on.
All right. And have you watched Ancient Aliens before?
I'm an OG Ancient Alien fans. I think I caught the first season when I was either in high school or just graduated. My friends and I were kind of ironic viewers. We would like to hang out, find it somewhere. I don't remember how we would even come across it. History Channel, it must have been, I guess. But we were drink a lot of beer, smoke a lot of weed, and then really damage our brains by watching some Ancient Aliens. We were those kinds of guys.
So you're quite familiar with the different claims, or do you remember?
Well, so that's rewatching it, becoming reacquainted with it, reminded me how little I know about Ancient Aliens. Because this is just wild. I kind of forgot how bonkers it was, even though it's Ancient Aliens, it's kind of off the wall. I was still pretty surprised by just, it feels like you're getting blasted by a hose with just craziness.
Yeah, that's the feeling I think many come away with after watching this show.
Very overwhelming, yeah.
As I mentioned previously, I think that's a way to get, the viewers to stay attentive, especially the high and drunk ones. Do you feel like when you look back as it maybe help you stay on topic when you watch the show in your youth?
I don't know, because for us, we were already coming into it. It's not like we were like, oh, golly gee, what could be happening in the world of Ancient Aliens that we don't know about? We were watching it going, boo, you suck, and all that stuff. So I don't remember thinking like, wow, that was a really jarring transition, and like I did when I was soberly watching it. Like, that was confusing. Yeah. It was a lot more it just felt so strangely cohesive, but so crazy at the same time. Like, this episode, it really felt like there was an overall something they were trying to, like, an overall theory they had, but they kept just tossing so much stuff at you that you kind of had no choice but to follow that thread. And when you're drunk, you're not following that thread ever. There's no chance you're following that.
There might be a point to that, but how about we get into the meat of it, so to say?
Let's do it.
The show is called Alien Devastations, and it will be the topic for this show. They like to have, a set topic, if it's angels or devastations or mysterious places. But here they are focusing on the doomsday. And they're starting with, of course, the Mayan calendar that was all the rage in 2010,
Oh, yeah.
as I remember it. Do you remember all the hysteria and
Yeah, I do. I mean, of course, right? It was huge for a long time, but what was funny to me is watching this was I kind of, oh yeah, the world's going to end in 2012. Like, it was never something
Hmm.
I was like, let me investigate this. This seems interesting. It was always just so plainly not true, and it was like a punchline more than anything
Yeah.
else. So as much as I'm familiar with it, I didn't really know what I didn't know about it.
But we opened the show on the Mayan calendar, and especially a place in Tortigo, Mexico, I believe it is. There's a Monument 6, as archaeologists like to do. We tend to put a boring name of quite interesting things,
Oh yeah.
usually numbers. But Monument 6 is, or the show wants the viewer to think this is a highly debated monument. And to extent, somewhat true, but it's more if one word should be translated to descend or descent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found I found the splitting hairs of descent versus descend to be very silly.
But the show wants this Stella to portray that the Mayans really believe that the end of worlds would come in 2010 or 2012 with the aliens coming down, descending from the sky. I think Van Daniken
The thing
puts
that was
it in.
really killing me about the Mayan calendar, like they spent all this money doing this animation of
Mm.
the calendar, and it's like a gear, and I don't know if that seems not historically accurate, that the Mayans had this like stone gear that they built, but even still, when you're looking at that animation, and yep, this is the end, and it's two circles. It's an absolute cyclical. Like, I'm looking at it, and guys, no, it doesn't end. It just keeps going. It's two
Yeah,
circles put together. It's so frustrating that that's the end of the world somehow.
Yeah, I think they don't really understand how a calendar works, because I hardly think Van Daniken sits on New Year's Eve hiding, thinking the world would come to end. But as you say, the gears are very anachronistic for the Mayans. They didn't have, the type of technical
Machining,
uh, machining. It is true that they had this notion about a cylinder, and you could shift the different names and years to get to the specific dates, but they had this notion that time was cyclical. So everything started in different cycles, everything was bound to repeat itself. Then they start talking a little bit about dates, and they actually get something correct. So yes, the Mayan calendar starts on August 11th, 3114 BCE, which is fair and correct, but what they forget to notion or mention is that this is the start of the 13th Baktun. So one Baktun is a couple of thousands of years in Mayan tradition, 3,000 years, something like that. And this is what to come to an end on 2012.
So like a long month.
Yeah, a long month, or a millennia.
Yeah. And as we
Yeah.
know, at the end of every millennia, there's the Ragnarok event that we live with all the time.
And they don't spend too much time on the Mayans. I think they will have an episode totally dedicated to it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that will be.
We don't want the Mayans to get shortchanged.
But they usually do this. This should be short. It should be precise.
Well, that's how I remembered it more, was like just random vignettes where they were like, here's something from history, and what if it was aliens? I always used to say that if you kind of strategically pause the show, you could get a halfway decent surface level education, because they'll say something like, the Mayans had their calendar and it started this date, and then you pause, and then you've got some real information, you know.
The creators would be able to make very good real documentaries if they didn't put in all the aliens. The photography and everything, it's very decent. But from the doomsday of 2012, we move, of course, to book of Revelations.
Oh yeah.
Is this something you have come across a lot in your podcast as a driving force?
Yeah, I mean, just like Revelations culturally is so huge, and like I'm been fascinated by religion my entire life. Never been a religious person, but just been, you know,
Mm.
a lot of atheists and fundamentalists have it in common that most of them can't shut up about religion anyway. And Revelations is awesome. It's just, you know, it's the heavy metal Bible book.
End of times within Christianity has always been, you know, the driving force of it since basically Jesus, if you think about it. It's always had this, you know, we're living in the end times. Every generation has its own end times.
Mm-hmm.
They use the book of Revelation to, again, talk about how the aliens will end the world, I think, because the aliens don't like us or
Well,
what their theory is.
this whole episode to me had this overarching theme of the Bible is true and God is real, but the issue with that is you're a moron if you don't realize that it's clearly aliens and not angels. Like, you know, grow up. There's no such thing as angels. They're advanced beings from Nibiru, you know.
This stems from their last episode. So with Tina Russell, we had this notion, and they talk specifically about angels, and that angels isn't angels but aliens, and God are really aliens. But the Bible is true, and it's the best evidence we have for aliens, not angels.
And not just true, but true and as to like why those things are happening. Like, yeah, they were punishing us. Yeah, it's just probably probably not because we weren't praying, but I'm sure the ancient aliens lore gets into that eventually.
The book of Revelation, they want to use this to somehow prove that time is cyclical.
If only they had some kind of very useful illustration to demonstrate that for us.
Yeah, so we bring up volcanoes. Yay.
Oh yeah.
Super volcanoes. And they talk about the volcano Lake Toba. I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but it was a massive volcanic eruption some 75,000 years ago. Michael Dennin talks about how materials from volcanoes can block the sun, and again, that's something they actually have correct. They talk about this in season 1, and we mentioned it on the podcast too, but big volcano eruption can block out the sun, and we have even just some 200 years ago, the year without a summer. Are you familiar with that?
No, not really.
It was a quite large volcanic eruption in Southwest Asia that debris from the volcano spit out in the atmospheres and chilling the earth, actually, to a degree where we had winter in summer and destroyed harvests in the United States, Europe, and was quite devastating for a couple of years.
It's like I've known that can happen. I'm just like not super familiar with like historical examples of it. And like, yeah, like Lake Toba, I had never heard of either. This is where I can see the show might be able to get somebody if you're halfway curious and there's something you've never heard of, or if you've never read anything ever, I guess.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh wow, I had no idea about that. That's crazy. What a big explosion. I can't imagine the planet just doing that, you know?
Yeah, as I said, they bring up these quite fantastic places, amazing stories, and then they put aliens in them, which is sad because they are making good TV, but they fill it with a bunch of junk too. But why they bring up the Lake Toba is to show that the aliens tried to kill us once already with the volcano. Because of course we will learn later on that aliens can control volcanoes.
There's a big section in this where I wrote down in my notes because it's like volcanoes, earthquakes, and I was just like, oh my god, the Earth is aliens. This is nuts.
Yeah, and they bring up that I think it's Giorgio Tsoukalos.
No,
That
Giorgio, my man.
yeah, he's my favorite. He says anything if he gets paid.
He's
But
well, he's the confidence of him. Obviously, he was like the standout from the first season with the aliens meme and stuff.
yeah,
But I laughed out loud when he first made an appearance in this episode because I remember him and what he looked like in the first season. And I just saw this, and he's got his teeth fixed. He's got a tan.
yeah,
His hair's still crazy, but it's silky smooth now. I like how. I mean, it's terrible because he spreads misinformation for a living, but it's very funny to see that, you know, he must have been a real big hit at the conventions. He's probably met a couple of women who changed his life since the first season started to air.
yeah, yeah.
You can tell he's really feeling himself a lot more than he used to.
He have branded that crazy hair and Trump bronze skin heavily since then. But he brings up claim that the population during this, Toba explosion dwindled to 3,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's been discussed in the scientific community, the reference of a genetic bottleneck, especially from the Toba, but I wasn't that aware of it. So again, I get to learn something nice and true. But today we're not really sure if the population dwindled that much, since human is quite good at adapting themselves. And from the different archaeological digs, we can see, the layers quite nicely. So we have a layer with stone tools, and then we have the debris from the Toba explosion, and then we move on to immediately under have more stone tool, which means that the site was populated and there's no interruption between it. So probably wasn't a dwindle to 3,000 person. There was one paper bringing up that number, but they in the conclusion say, but we're not sure, we can't really prove this.
Yeah, I was curious if the origin of this kind, because I've heard this before, probably about Lake Toba, but just didn't pick up on that there's been a couple of genetic bottlenecks where you could fit the entire human population in a stadium and stuff. But I've always been like, I'm curious now if there's some kind of genetic lines that have evidence of genetic bottlenecks, because we know that for sure all over the world that there's certain populations that come to a genetic bottleneck, like often with one male breeding with many females, and you can find that evidence in the genealogical record as far as I understand. But no, they're just 3,000 people. We know it. How do we know it? Shut up.
Shh, don't ask too many questions.
Yeah.
No, so they're stating that as true, but yeah, the reality is it probably not.
Well, I mean, there probably were disasters where a lot of people died, and by nature of a lot of people dying, there would have been fewer than there were.
But the 3,000 number, I doubt. But as you say, we have died a lot during
something we're very good
history. But I think they bring up this low number so they can talk about Noah's Ark.
Oh, this gonna slap me in the face. I really was not expecting Noah's Ark to come up all of a sudden. It's weird how so much of the Bible is true to these people, but it's still so sacrilegious in that they pay no attention to any kind of regular biblical divination, or even like people who figure out time scales in the Bible, where if you have this Lake Toba explosion 75,000 years ago, and that's takes us right to Noah, is such a huge jump. And like the Bible kind of sort of not really explains that there's like, okay, a deeper history, and then we move into the events of the Bible and Abraham and Noah and blah 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 blah. And this ancient aliens is just like, no, there was 75,000 years ago, there's 3,000 people, and then a very wise man built an ark and brought 2 of every animal to it, and just kind of your head starts spinning,
But they do enjoy Noah's Ark, and to be fair, I'm amazed that the ancient alienist doesn't get picketed more by the Christian right during their conventions and things like that. When I think about it,
I honestly think that like some Christians would hate this, but I bet a few are just excited young people are getting into
Yeah.
You know, some old lady's grandson was talking about Noah, and she got very excited. She didn't care if it was because you know, advanced aliens gave him knowledge of the future or whatever.
As I started to say, they like Noah's story, but what amazes me is the aliens, according to ancient aliens, have these interstellar travel, nuclear weapon armories, and all of that, but still they use things like volcanic eruptions to eliminate humans and floods to get rid of us instead of they apparently genetically created us. I guess they can
Yeah,
splice in some
yeah.
genes and just wipe us out or
Well, it's the genetic creation stuff in this is where I was kind of I didn't remember Ancient Aliens being so problematic in that you know, it's like a lot of people have got some pretty crazy opinions about human populations or whatever,
Hmm.
but as I was watching that and I was just kind of like tapping my foot going, hey Georgius, which group of people has the most alien blood? You know, because clearly there's got to be some hierarchy with respect to that, right?
I think he has an answer to, but he is not allowed to say it on the television show.
Oh God, they all got answers to.
I think there's a lot of things that's been cut away.
Yeah,
A lot worse than they are actually saying.
it's very rare for somebody to be a like total nut job in just one direction.
Yeah.
You know, it's very rare that you meet, you know, if you go out looking for Bigfoot, you're not going to run into too many physicists and stuff.
It's quite rare. They are out there, but yeah, in much lower numbers.
Yeah, I'm just if you're someone whose opinion of prehistory is constant alien civilizations visiting us in battles and injecting our DNA to kill the Neanderthals, like God, I feel like I'm driving myself crazy just by talking about it. But if that's your opinion of prehistory, I imagine if someone asks you about modern race, you're going to have some pretty interesting opinions as well.
Yeah, and maybe it's best that Sokolos haven't mentioned that out loud. It would be interesting to hear, maybe, but it makes me a little bit scared. Well, from the Noah's Ark, they again repeat this notion that the time is cyclical and we're due for a big tsunami or volcanic eruption, and they speak a bit about the 2004 tsunami that hit Thailand and
Yeah,
killed
I
quite a
found
lot of.
this to be such poor taste.
I even know people who was in Thailand and survived the tsunami. So
And so shockingly recent. Like this aired in 2010, I think.
yeah,
So this is
2010
like
late.
6 years in their time where it was 200,000 people. Like I remember that happening, but it was just as I was watching it, I was just kind of like, "Oh my God, are you guys for real right now?"
Around here trying to put out like detective novel, so they start about talking about how people saw all these spaceships and strange light before it, because the answer is of course it was aliens who tried to drown all these people, you know, putting in the poor taste a bit extra.
Well, it's the aliens again without like saying, yeah, the aliens had a problem with this part of the world.
Yeah. The Asian part of the world, and then we
Yeah.
move to the Eyjafjallajökull's volcanic eruption again to show that they talk about some V shape in the clouds that looks like a few
Geese.
weird geese or pixels or
Let's
I
say
don't
the
know.
guy says this object is clearly under intelligent control,
and some of it clearly shows an anomalous object hovering roughly around the volcano. This object is clearly under intelligent control, and from what we see on the video, it's also apparent that this isn't birds, as some skeptics have been trying to argue.
that object is not clearly anything. It's just this blurry image.
Yeah, you zoom in on a video film in 2010, of course you will get blurry. It's not like they can go enhance and we see a nice spaceship, but yeah,
I think that was happening in that fella's mind.
of course, Coppens, he said enhance and he saw an UFO clearly. But we move on from Eyjafjallajökull's volcanic eruption to they talk about this phenomenon previously on the show in season 1, which make what they're saying far more interesting, at least for me. So we're going to talk about the Nuremberg UFO again. And I've talked about this one before, I think it's episode 8. First of all, they state in Nuremberg Gazette. That was my first what? Gazette is an Italian word for copper coin that was, used as a synonym for newspaper in Venice.
Yeah, I didn't catch this. This is funny.
And the first evidence of Gazette in print for a name of a newspaper is in 1620. So this is 1561 in Germany, which of course makes things a little bit strange. But they talk about different tubes resembling cannon barrels, and they're fighting each other. This one is correct. And after a bit of the battle, they seem to catch fire and fall into the earth, where they turn to steam. Again, a bit what this is different from season 1. And then
well, they've done research. There's been developments.
I don't understand how the narrator doesn't catch this, because he he was the one who talked about this in season 1. But then they go 5 years later, an Austrian architect named Hans Glaser create a woodcut dealing this famous event. And Hans Glaser is the one who made the woodcut they are talking about and showing on the screen. But he made that the same month. And he was not an architect. He was a German printer. So I think they're lost what they're talking about. And again, showing how much they like to enhance the truth, so to say.
In ways that are not even helpful.
No,
to make their
for themselves.
Like they're just wrong. Yeah. He's hey, who printed this thing? Was it a printer or an architect? Well, must have been the architect. Yeah, this whole bit I found not very convincing, and
No.
A big part of that was just that, like, I don't know much about this phenomenon or like event that they're talking about, but I would think if there is some kind of intergalactic war that the skies of Earth are becoming a battlefield for, it's going to do a bit more damage to the planet and leave a bit more of a wider impression than than it would be noticed by more people than the Nuremberg Gazette.
Again, they want to have this doomsday theory, and the warring faction is something that they bring up a lot in Ancient Aliens. So you have the lizard people fighting the Greys, I think. Their pet theory is, because there's good aliens and evil aliens. I think the Grey ones are the good, according to them, while lizards are bad.
There's some I hate to keep bringing it back to it, but it just kept hit me in the head anyway, where it's just like there's something racial going on there, where there's the good light-colored big-brained aliens, and then there's the evil animalistic bad dark ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of those undertones. So they do enjoy talking about white gods in South America, for example, and Mesoamerica. That, of course, were the good guys, proving that, white people were there, basically.
I see.
But they are quite problematic, and it doesn't get better when you talk about it.
It was kind of, I think part of it, too, is that in 2010, even if I was, like, not young and all messed up as I was watching it, I think in the past 6 or 7 years in North America, especially, you've had to pay a bit more attention to dog whistles and whatever other word you want to use for people who are racist, but know they can't just come out and say what they really feel.
Yeah.
So like I think everybody's antennas are a bit more finely tuned to it, and then when you start getting like deep in the human genome, we can determine blah, 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 blah. You're just kind of going, oh no, guys, talking about skull shapes.
Don't do that, please. And I don't know, this segment felt a bit off because I didn't get the devastation part of it, but they talk about how aliens have interfered with humans. So we bring up Leonardo da Vinci. In a way, I found this part refreshing because they take ideas from some white people for the first time, not just robbing Africans, South Americans, Mesoamericans of their heritage. But so Leonardo da Vinci, he didn't come up with all his theories and all of that by himself. No, how would he made doodles of tanks and cars and other things? No, he had aliens whisper in his ear how to, draw these things.
What was with the way they introduced Da Vinci by saying, have some jabroni come on and say, yeah, Da Vinci is a real crazy, interesting guy. He was left-handed and ambidextrous, and just listed all the least interesting things about Leonardo da Vinci. It was just like, wow, what a guy.
He was the true archetypal Renaissance man. Brilliant painter, brilliant inventor, brilliant poet, ambidextrous, could write with his left hand and his right hand at the same time, wrote backwards instead of forwards. A very interesting guy.
I think that's Wilcock, his name. Blonde, scrawny fella.
Mm-hmm.
He usually tends to bring up weirder things, so that Leonardo was left-handed or ambidextrous was pretty normal for him. And then they go on to say that during this extraterrestrial visitation, he got fed with prophecies, and they're making this huge fuss on Da Vinci's prophecies. But if you're interested in Da Vinci and what he had done, they have actually digitalized his codexes. So they're bringing up the Codex Atlanticus, it's called. You can find it online. You can read the whole thing if you want. It's very beautiful to see his drawings and read his handwriting. But these prophecies that they talk about in the show is things like, men will sleep and eat and make their dwelling among trees grown in the forest and the fields.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is
that's some interstellar knowledge you just dropped on your audience and myself here. That's crazy.
Yeah, so these are the prophecies that Leonardo wrote. So wisdom words that I don't know if he thought up or doodled or heard somewhere and thought, oh, this is deep, man.
Yeah. That's one thing I wanted to say, because I had the same thought about, like, oh, isn't it nice we're attacking a great European. However, then it kind of dawned on me that I'm going to go out on a limb and say, as well as their complex historical theories, they've probably got some complex racial hierarchies, and I'm not sure they would consider Italians white people.
But then they say that Einstein also have...
That's true.
And Oppenheimer and von Braun.
Yeah.
So
yeah, what else did von Braun believe? They're getting into... Von Braun had some interesting theories about aliens, and like, yeah, he sure did. He had a lot of really interesting theories about how the world should work.
Yeah, maybe bringing up the one who served during under Hitler in Germany isn't the greatest fella. But yeah, von Braun is problematic in general. Yes,
well, I mean, you could make the argument like maybe there's something the ancient aliens could do about the Nazis being aliens, and then they had to... The Nazis couldn't let them all go, and that's what Operation Paperclip was in the United States and the Soviet Union, was making sure that the aliens got where they needed to go.
So yeah, that will be an episode. It's upcoming. They actually have a whole episode dedicated to Nazi Germany. And I found 2 accounts of Holocaust denial already in that episode. So it will be a blast.
Okay, yeah. Is it denial? Not to get off topic here, but is it denial of the whole Holocaust, or is it just denial that the Germans did it?
No, of the whole thing. They even the persons have been convicted in a German courtroom for it.
Cool. Great. Yeah. Aliens,
Alien. So if you're waiting for it to be more problematic, stay tuned. It's coming up.
Great.
And of course, they have to bring up Tesla in all of this. He is the go-to guy for strange claims. And I'm not sure they got a single thing right about Tesla this time around. So we have David Serrada. I have no idea who he is. Really, is the first time he appeared on the show, at least for me. But he talked about the death ray that Tesla, according to him, developed. According to Serrada, Tesla was murdered.
Yeah, they just kind of slid that past you.
They
didn't they presented without evidence or comment after Tesla was murdered, and that was the beginning and end of the Tesla was murdered arc on the show.
Yeah, I felt a bit what? Yeah, they just bring it up and then leave it there.
The Tesla stuff is where I really started to feel my brain leaking out of my ears. It was just started really. It just like the cuts started happening way faster, and it just. And Tesla was murdered. What? And he built the death ray. It's like, I've heard that before. And he built it on a U.S. Air Force naval base. And what's happening? It's just so.
And
nuts.
he built it in 1943, which is strange because he died in January 1943. And Tesla did die January 7, 1943, so that he would develop a death ray on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1943 is, well, somewhat out of the question, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Tesla is one of those who has a lot of weird claims surrounding him in general.
A weird guy.
He was quite eccentric, mainly because he sort of lost all his funding during the Depression and fell into quite a tragic life story, suffering probably some sort of mental illness. But he stayed his last couple of years working out of a hotel room, basically. And the FBI did seize all his things after his death, mostly because it was a world war and people said that he had a death ray. What was the death ray? Well, it was a multi-decade resistance box that I'm not sure what they are supposed to do, but apparently it was a quite common apparatus among electricity engineers for that time.
Yeah. Electricity to me is basically magic. I've worked really hard to try to understand something that's happening there, and I just can't. So it would be a great place for them to get something for a guy like me to be like, wow, that really is an unexplainable phenomenon. But they don't do that. They just talk about Tesla's death ray, and
and of course the death ray he got from the aliens, because where was the Roswell alien sent? Well, to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, of course, where Tesla was developing the death ray with the aliens.
So I guess like the Roswell crash was just like it's like the equivalent of a Amazon car or Amazon truck crashing into your garage. Yeah, we really got to get to the bottom of who killed Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, I have no idea where that claim come from. I tried to find it, but it seems as it's only David Serrada who said it in this episode.
the only David Serrada in this episode ever in history. No one else has ever said it.
At least not that I can find. Is there out there? Write me, but at least I couldn't find it.
If it hasn't been indexed by Google, it doesn't count.
Then it doesn't exist. Easy as that. But from Tesla, we go to human evolution, because, well, now we're going to try to be a little bit problematic. I think it's here where Giorgio says my favorite thing in the whole series so far.
Oh, yeah.
He's saying, there we sat, eating bananas, and bang, we had complex civilizations.
Well, it was great because, like, Giorgio's, God bless him, can't really even like be racist coherently, because I've heard some people say, swinging from trees, eating bananas, or eating mammoth meat in caves or something like that. But I don't think of caves in being very lush Caribbean environments.
No, and just the fact that the bananas were cultivated in the shape that we think about today a lot later. But they bring this up because, of course, the aliens were mixing with the DNA so they could eradicate us later. I'm not sure really what they're trying to say with this
Yeah, very
part.
incoherent. The whole theory of they really gotta they made us because they thought there was something wrong with us, and they have to punish themselves after they. It's I don't. It honestly, it is like this whole thing reminds me of like secular evangelicalism,
Mm.
where they're just pushing their kind of their religion, right? It's just not a regular one you're used to on you, and there's all these little inconsistencies all the way through, just like any other religion, you know.
And they bring up this that they have the technology to change the DNA in Neanderthals to become humans, but they're still going to use a massive flood or a volcano to try to wipe us out at the same time, which I don't know, it doesn't really track.
Well, and like we didn't we didn't descend from Neanderthals. I realize I'm splitting hairs a bit here, but it's not like they kept saying things like this was 425,000 years ago, the age of the Neanderthals. And that's no, there was no there were Neanderthals and now there's not, but it wasn't like the Neanderthals were in their huts going, oh God, I'm so glad there's no humans around here, you know.
No, and well, the science there is in that we do have Neanderthal DNA in the genes, especially the European populations a bit more. But
Yeah.
why they got extinct, that's a question that archaeologists and biologists to some extent are still debating in a sense, because it's not entirely clear. It could be environmental shifts or that people are just, we like killing things. We like to kill people that don't look like us. I guess the
Yeah.
Neanderthals could get the rough end there too. But yeah, the why they went extinct is somewhat unclear. It wasn't aliens, I can say for sure.
Well,
But
it's if the claim, if they were trying to like, I want to help these guys out a little bit almost, where you want to, if the idea is there was a you could even dress it up with all like kind of pseudoscience about Neanderthals and say that their brains are bigger than us, they were stronger than us, all stuff like that. But they had to be taken down because they weren't correct in some way, and that's why the aliens got rid of the Neanderthals. But they don't do that. They say they we were turned into from Neanderthals. It's very strange.
no, and it's quite amazing. Okay, right, when this was filmed, the Human Genome Project wasn't really finished, or Svante Pääbo's project about studying the Neanderthal genome. But today we know that the human genome lacks any alien component so far. Same with the Neanderthal genome, no aliens there either. So putting this question to rest, or it should have at least.
Well, and if there at least, well, hold on. We want to be correct here. If at the very least, if there is any alien DNA in our genome, it looks exactly like the rest of the DNA that's there.
Fair point. So it could be time travel Homo sapiens from another planet.
Yeah, now you're thinking. Now you're cooking with gas, brother.
Here we start to talk about the Anunnaki, which is a favorite topic for the ancient alienist and made famous by Zachariah Sitchin in his books 12th Planet. And the show say something like he spent 30 years translating some 22,000 clay tablets in Sumerian. And okay, sounds impressive, except that Sitchin haven't proven that he could speak any of those ancient languages that the show claims that he did.
But even if I assume that these guys are all hacks and frauds.
Yeah.
But the even if you grant their qualifications, if not their assertions, and say like, okay, this guy's an Assyria expert, and he's been digging through Ashurbanipal's library and what survives of it, and this is what he's learned. That still wouldn't be like that's a myth. Then it's it's still just it still wouldn't be a factual step by step of the Anunnaki bird people and how they told us to live.
The issue for Sitchin and von Däniken and all of these people who have taken liberties with translation is that science is moving forward. So today you have dictionaries, not our dictionaries, but the Sumerians' own dictionaries widely available online. So you can go and look up each of these claim quite easily, even as a layperson. And yeah, it's not what scientists think the word means, it's what the actual Sumerian think the word meant. So
Yeah.
the Anunnaki, of course, isn't some strange race from Nibiru. It means of princely seed, basically. So the kids of Anun, Sumerian god, makes sense. Even the 12th planet that Sitchin talks about doesn't make sense because when you think about it, there's 9 planets, depending on how you classify Pluto. So we're missing at least 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna I started typing like 12 when I was gonna put a question mark, but then I thought, you know what? Not even gonna. I'm just gonna let the duck off of water's back. Tesla's dead. There's two planets Tesla presumably discovered.
Yeah, maybe he found the 12th planet. That's why he was killed off by.
He found the 10th and 11th, and his murderer found the 12th.
Yeah, could be. But the Anunnaki are supposedly the race that, I don't know, DNA cloned us from the Neanderthals, according to the show.
Yeah. They've done a bunch of different kind of DNA splicing almost, right?
Yeah, and then they use this to try to tie up the bag because the Anunnaki, the aliens, they messed up somehow and made a bad batch of humans, and that's why they want to drown us, according to Van Daniken.
Yeah.
Again, they have gene splicing. They can maybe design some, make everybody sterile or something like that. But
well, like the biblical flood myths or like flood myths of Mesopotamian culture are super fascinating because they are so relatively constant. And it does seem like, as far as I understand, a lot of scholars and archaeologists agree that there was a massive flood or a series of massive floods several thousand years ago in the time of Sumeria and stuff. But it's it's weird that if it were aliens and they wanted to flood the world, they wouldn't do a better job. And that they would need successive floods. Just like they got interstellar travel, but flooding 200 villages in the Bronze Age is just impossible technologically.
And what I find even more fascinating is that the flood myth, as you mentioned, they pop up in several places, and the show also usually makes a big deal about it. But it's only in places where floods are common. So, for example, here in Sweden, we don't have a flood myth from ancient times. Or if you look at Mongolia, you won't find flood myth. But in places that have floods, you have flood myth. I wonder why at the same time.
Well, and in particular, the cradle of humanity and civilization and stuff, like Mesopotamia between 2 rivers. Yeah, you're going to get some floods there.
And at the same time, you don't have to have a huge flood because you were quite local in your society back then. So if your village were flooded and a big chunk of the surrounding of it, that was basically your whole world. So it's not impossible to think that even such an event would think that people, the gods are trying to kill everyone. Everybody must have like this. So that's also an aspect. But
it's crazy how much these aliens, like if you strip it all down, they are just like the difference between aliens and ancient gods. Like they're only mistaking them and not calling them astronauts. Like everything else is exactly as they described in their mythology.
Yeah,
they can control floods. They descend from the sky, etc. But like they have all these powers, but it's just we're not superstitious losers who would think that this would be some kind of supernatural thing. This is completely natural outer space stuff.
They have a skeptic approach to it that you have to admire. That they're trying to find the reality behind the myth, and then they skip one step and end up on because it's aliens.
Yeah, they did skip trying to find the reality of the myth, and then they skip the reality step and just land on another myth.
From here, we're starting to come to the end of the episode, more or less. In a sense, it felt, I don't know, not much within it. But they're talking about the Georgia Guidestones. I've encountered them before a little bit. Are
I
you
was
familiar with
furious
them?
about this. I vaguely, I can remember. This is one of those things that a lot of the stuff in this episode is stuff I've like heard of before from someone at a party or whatever, going off about Nibiru and stuff, and like it's alien splicing and DNA. I've heard all of that, but it's just like none of that was interesting enough to look into. And the Georgia Guidestones, I can remember hearing about, and then looking into and being like, "This is the '70s. Get out of here." It's not amazing that somebody put up stones in a field.
No, but they want to spin the whole historian that it's part of the Rosicrucians, and I felt that they really get off the rails here. It's been quite crazy the whole episode, but here, I don't know, they just went into the deep end and they started to talk about the aliens abductions and breeding experiments and alien human hybrids, and that aliens have started to infiltrate our world since 2003. And I say, what?
Yeah.
You know, if somebody with a little bit mental illness see this, it could lead to some dangerous.
Yeah, well, I mean, you lead to something dangerous, or lead to role as a talking head on the program Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, everything is a tad problematic again.
For your purposes too, there's nothing to really check into.
No, it's hard to say if there's any alien human hybrids out there who implants memories. It's hard to prove or disprove.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, like, you can't go crack open a history book
And find the answer. No,
Yeah.
It makes it harder. And to be honest, I thought Ancient Aliens would have more history in it, but it's mostly just volcanoes and shape-shifting aliens.
Oh, I mean, like I know the show does like go eventually they get into like the American Revolution and
Yeah.
all that stuff. I'm not sure if that has happened yet, but like, yeah, this was really. I feel like whoever makes this show, I think it's like Prometheus Entertainment or something like that. I was curious. I was doing some googling. There's got to be like one or two people in that hierarchy who are true believers.
I think the main producer is the big believer, Kevin Burns.
Yeah, he just died.
That I missed
2 years
actually.
ago. But yeah, so it's got to be him who's the real thrust, and I feel like the first couple seasons have got to be his good news gospel he's sharing with the world, because this is like anytime I've tuned in or seen it more recently, it had more of a feel that it was like these are kind of historical or vaguely archaeological vignettes about aliens, and this really felt kind of cohesive in this strange way. Like it's a big mess, but it's all in one bag of like, this is a belief system that's at work here.
Yeah, it has this almost religious undertones to it, that this is what we believe. But the interesting thing with Ancient Aliens is that it was first pitched to be 50-50. So you had 50% skeptics, 50% believers, and then they would, basically debate between each other. And that's how they got some of the talking heads from the first season.
Right.
Who were real scientists, because they actually used to have real scientists like Sarah Seeger and a lot of NASA people in the show.
I think the folklorist that they have I think he's legit.
I'm not sure. I haven't really been able to pin him down yet, because sometimes he feels that he says, things that are correct, and then all of a sudden he says something in regards to aliens and how that theory is correct. But I'm not sure if it's just cleverly cut or a believer.
It seemed to me whenever he was talking, he used a lot of very almost like legalistic or journalistic language where you would say things like, some people believe, or people they've taken from that, they've taken this fact or whatever. Like
Yeah.
he has this kind of, I'm not saying any of this. This is just what other people are saying, which can obviously be a tactic to get your beliefs out there.
Yeah.
But I just didn't get the sense from him that he was ever talking about it, what he thinks personally. It was always a bit more of like the broader community of, freaks or whatever you want to say, who subscribe to this worldview. This is what they think. Because again, like the Nibiru stuff, the DNA splicing, I feel like that's a lot more of a certain perspective than just like, what if it's aliens?
Turned into a somewhat gospel, and they are hammering, especially in the social media now, when they have these live shows. If you haven't seen that, so you can go on and see Ancient Aliens live, basically.
Oh my god.
With,
Ancient Aliens on ice.
But I would pay a lot of money to see Sukalos and Von Daniken go around the ice doing acrobatic tricks on. But yeah, it's turned into a more religious notion that this is the gospel. You have the Von Daniken, and when you're a believer, you're in 100%. And facts won't be able to sway you to leave that system, really.
Well, in like any fact you do find that's in some way incontrovertible, when you really think about it, only goes to prove your original thesis again.
They even brought this up themselves. So in one episode, Bill Barnes says something to that: the more you're trying to convince me I'm wrong, the more I know that I'm right. Leaving
science,
all notions of science.
Yeah, if you turn that into Latin, I'm pretty sure there's some science department that's their motto.
No, but this was something for episode.
Yeah, it's like I feel a little bit cheated in my digging up Ancient Aliens experience, because I think I might be the biggest fan of your show to be on the show so far. I haven't checked that, but and like so many of the other episodes I've listened to, there's a little bit more that at least you as an archaeological professional get to like dig into, to kind of understand. And like this is like, I was excited because it's going to talk about the Book of Revelations, but it's barely in there at all. It's just kind of like, what if the Book of Revelations wasn't angels, it was aliens?
And then we have Noah's Ark.
That's the fact that it was true is the Noah's Ark and Revelations. That's all taken for granted that those things really happened.
Yeah,
you'd have to be a fool to not understand that. But what you don't understand is how it happened.
No, the whole episode felt a bit that they cheated themselves out of something.
Yeah, it's just there's not a lot of there on this one.
No, unfortunately not. What a sad point to leave off on. But if people want to hear more of you, where should they go?
They can listen to my podcast, Religious Wars. You can get it anywhere you get your podcasts, or you can go to religiouswarspodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric0101, but I never tweet, so I don't know why I even brought it up. Maybe it's my ancient DNA trying to make everybody more technological or something.
Could be.
Can't prove it's not.
All right, Eric. It was great to have you on, even if you didn't get much of the bigger experience. But I love have you on another time.
Yeah, I would love to be back. I look forward to some of the in the later seasons of the show and stuff, where I feel like they're gonna run out of wood to burn on like all the real like Nibiru and stuff. Lots of people believe in that. I'm looking forward to seasons 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., where they really let their hair down.
It will be very nice to see that. I'm looking forward to the episode where they talk about aliens and cowboys. I have no idea what that will entail.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna in the mid 19th century in the American South, there's something going on with DNA.
All right, Eric. Have a great one and see you later.
Thanks, you too.
Again, a big thank you to Eric. And if you want to hear more from him, you should check out his podcast, Religious Wars. It's been a great lot of fun to spend some time with him. Links to his stuff will be in the show notes as usual. Remember to leave a positive review anywhere you can, such as iTunes, Spotify, or, of course, to your friend in the trench. I would also recommend you to visit the diggingupancientaliens.com to find some more info about me and the podcast. There you can also find most of my social media sites. And if you have comments, corrections, suggestions, or you're one of those who just want to write an email in all caps, you can find my contact info at the website. On our website, you will also find the resources that was used to create this podcast. You will often also find some further reading suggestions if you want to learn more about the subjects we bring up. The intro music was created by Alexander Nakarada, and of course our fantastic outro was written and performed by the Swedish band called Trallskruv, who will again sing us out with their song Tinfoil Hat. Links to both of these artists will be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep showing that science.
Men jag skyddar mig för jag har foliehatt. Och så säger ni det är en galen fantasi att ingen manipulerar oss med telepati. Ni tycker att jag redan är besatt, men jag skyddar mig för jag har foliehatt.
Revelations, or when you look into the future, what's that called? I lost all my languages.
Divination.
Yep. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. Remember that we have a subscription going on. You can become a patron or other subscriber for as little as $2.50 per episode. Go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support. That is, go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support to read more information and sign up right there.